Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Um, we will let some people trickle in here. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late today. Had to wrap up a lunch meeting and then get back here to the office. Unfortunately, at least so far, um, college basketball isn't my only job. I do have what I call my quote unquote real job as well. So I was taking care of some business there, but excited to be here and talking with you all today. And have enjoyed doing these live episodes so far this college basketball season. Again, every Wednesday afternoon, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel is where you can find these all fired up episodes where we dive into a topic each Wednesday, and usually allow myself to get a little bit more worked up, as I have a tendency to do. And I think that'll certainly be the case with today's episode, which is talking about how college basketball fan bases, and honestly, this pertains to certainly college football fan bases. It pertains to your favorite, NBA team, NFL team, MLB team, any of that good stuff. If you're a fan, you probably have some times where you get a little crazy, you get upset with losses, and things aren't going your way. And that was the case for several of the top college basketball teams and college basketball fan bases around the country this past weekend when we saw 6 or 7 top 25 teams all go down. I mean, just off the top of my head, I mean, Purdue lost. Kansas beat Connecticut. Marquette got beat at Wisconsin. Obviously, Kentucky lost. Auburn got beat as well. Tennessee lost again. So there was a lot of losses going around, and every fan base handles it a little differently. I'm the most immersed in Big Blue Nation and the Kentucky basketball scene, but I'm certainly no stranger. I mean, I live here in Indiana, so I get a lot of Purdue news as well, and especially with their recent history, not all that dissimilar than from some of Kentucky's history. Purdue fans are, very raw when it comes to losing games that they don't expect to lose. That their recent NCAA tournament history has not been pretty, losing to 14, 15, and 16 seeds each of the last 3 tournaments. And then they turn around and lose to Northwestern. I guess that would have been on Friday night. That was at Northwestern. But that's kind of what I want to dive into a little bit to begin, is that not all of these losses are by any means created equally. You look at Purdue going on the road to play Northwestern. I believe the line closed at 5.5 with the Boilermakers as a favorite. First of all, not a it's a decent amount of points on the road against a conference opponent, but it's not like they're a double digit favorite. Usually a 5.5 point spread can probably go either way, and it's just really hard to win games in your conference on the road, especially. And these teams, especially because of how much Purdue is coming back, like Coach Chris Collins and Northwestern, they know Purdue like the back of their hand. They don't need to spend hours in the film room breaking down how they're going to guard Purdue. They don't need to spend hours in walkthrough going through what they want to do against the ball screens or how we're going to attack Zach Edey. Like, they have 3, 4, 5 games of experience playing against him and playing against Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and all those guys. So it's so much easier to prepare for these big conference opponents, and that's why you see teams, especially when they're playing on the home floor, win a lot of these conference games. And I don't think that Purdue, despite being number one in the country, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad loss to go and lose at Northwestern. Similarly, Marquette, who I think was number 3 at the country at the time, going and losing on the road at Wisconsin. I don't think that's necessarily a bad loss. Obviously, that's not a conference game, but it's an in-state rivalry. And historically, Wisconsin is a very tough place to play. You don't win on the Badgers' home court very often. And this is a veteran Wisconsin team. They bring essentially everybody back from last season. Obviously, Connor Essegian is not really playing anywhere near the role that he played last year, but still, their main guys are still their main guys. And certainly that's true with Marquette as well. I mean, they're arguably one of the most one of the most veteran, one of the most roster continuity teams in the country. However, it's hard to go and beat a rival on the road. So I don't think that was necessarily a bad loss. Um, Obviously, Kansas knocking off Connecticut, despite them being undefeated, having a whatever it would have been a 12-game winning streak, going back to last year, defending national champions. You know, they went to Fog Allen Arena and got beat by a few points to Kansas. That's certainly not a bad loss. Probably the best loss out of all of them. But still, we're talking about fan bases and we're talking about teams that, you know, there's a difference between expecting to win every game and expecting to go undefeated. Now, I know that's a little bit of a nuanced um, statement there, but I think that when you're a fan of number one Purdue, or you're a fan of defending national champion UConn, or you're a fan of certainly the Kentucky Wildcats, like, you are conditioned to going into every individual game expecting that you're going to win. And that's especially true when you're playing, at Northwestern, who obviously is historically not a very good team, though they've been much better, and they have an All-American probably this year in Boo Buie, but still, it's Northwestern. You're not supposed to lose to Northwestern. So if you're a Purdue fan, you get upset by that. If you're a Marquette fan, like, kind of, this is your year. You've been working for this under Coach Shaka Smart for a few seasons. You actually had a little bit of probably a disappointing end to last year, losing in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So you're going into every game thinking we're going to win the game, and that's true when you travel to Wisconsin too. It doesn't work out. It's a in-state rivalry, as I said, so that one hurts a little bit more when you do suffer that loss. Even UConn, like, well, hey, it's been a while since you lost a game. You're coming off winning the national championship. You're this marquee, one of the best games in college basketball. Yet this season, you get to, make your pilgrimage out to Fog Allen Arena, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. You get to experience all that stuff, and you lose. So it stings no matter what. There's a different level of sting, though, when you lose at home, admittedly, and that's what the Kentucky Wildcats did. Now, I'm going to spend some time here explaining why the sky isn't falling. It's not unacceptable. All of, some of those buzzwords that have flown around the message boards and Twitter, etc., here on here on this episode. But I think that what you have to keep in mind is that, along with the parity that has come with college basketball, that it's just not the same now as it was in 1990, or even in 2000, or probably even in 2010. Like, it's harder to win college basketball games now than it ever has been in the past, because you have great players playing at all these different places. No longer, I mean, even when you're a Kentucky and you have the number one recruiting class, you have some star transfers. Like, you still are playing. You're still playing schools at quote unquote lower levels that have these veteran guys, have guys that are all conference in their league. And I tried to prepare some people, but before the UNC Wilmington game, like, again, no. Should you lose to them, especially at Rep Arena? Obviously not. It is a bad loss. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You were a 17.5-point favorite for a reason. But any team that is capable of winning their league is capable of beating any team in the country on any floor on any given night. UNC Wilmington has a very good chance to win the Colonial Athletic Conference this season. They have a bunch of veteran guys that played for a conference championship last year, won 24 games, are extremely well coached under Takeo Siddell, who's going to be a high major coach probably next year if he wants to be. And it's interesting to watch still how fan bases kind of handle some of this adversity. Especially within BBN, and obviously, yes, I live it more because that's what my Twitter timeline consists of. Those are the radio shows I listen to. Those are the podcasts that I listen to. Those are the radio shows that I'm on. On Monday morning, I had to go on, one of the most listened to Lexington radio stations, and talk about the loss. And that's what we spend time talking about: 24, 48, 72 hours after the fact. But I know that crazy fandom is not unique to Kentucky. It's not unique to Purdue. It's not unique to Kansas or Connecticut or Duke or North Carolina. Like, a lot of fans, I think, sometimes lose sight of that when you're kind of living in the bubble of it. Like, one of my good friends who might be listening to this right now, he's a Penn State football fan. He gets frustrated sometimes because, good old big game James can't, beat Ohio State or Michigan. Well, Penn State fans, they freak out about that, and he, as a Penn State fan, is reading all the Twitter discourse, is on the message boards, is listening to the radio shows, the podcasts, etc., where it's like, man, like our fans are insane. All they talk about is like, is James Franklin the answer? Well, that's happening everywhere else too. You just don't like he doesn't follow the Purdue basketball message boards. He doesn't follow the Kentucky football message boards or the North Carolina basketball message boards. Just like we within Big Blue Nation, if you're listening to this, we don't hear all those other things. Now, Kentucky fans are probably turned up to 11 a little bit more than some others, admittedly, but it's still, again, it's not unique to be a crazy fan if you're, one of these fan bases that we're talking about. But as it pertains to Kentucky, to get on my soapbox a little bit, and I would encourage you to follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. Read some of my written work on KentuckySportsRadio.com as well, where you can get some longer form thoughts on this as well. But what I don't understand about the psychology of fandom, at least as we sit here on December 6th, 2023, is this rush to try to make things worse than it actually is. Now, again, and I wrote about this on our message board on KSR Plus, that you you don't have to be a sunshine pumper. You don't have to have your blue tinted glasses on. We're not trying to frame the conversation here that Northwestern is a Final Four team, or UNC Wilmington is a Final Four team, or that there should be top 25 in the country, or that like, well, yeah, like I knew they were going to lose at home to UNC Wilmington. Like, no, I didn't. What was I prepared that we would need to play well to beat them? Yes. Did I try to frame it ahead of time that like, hey, folks, this is a legitimately good team that might be an NCAA tournament team. Like, we need to be prepared to come out and play our best to beat these guys. Yeah, but what I don't understand is like here's essentially what the conversation went like after we lost to UNC Wilmington. I get on Twitter, say sky isn't falling. I think I literally started with in typical all fired up fashion, all caps. This was a bad loss, but then I made the rookie mistake apparently of saying ... but, and anything you say after that, you might as well just get ready for the ammo to be fired at you because people don't want to hear about the buts. And but what I said was UNC Wilmington might play in the NCAA tournament. They are a veteran team. They had a couple all-conference guys, like number 13 White that comes off the bench for them. He would play for every SEC team in the conference. He would play for every team in the conference. He would be in the rotation for every single college basketball program if he transferred today. Number 2 Phillips, very good playmaker. Like those guys are real players that could play anywhere. Again, doesn't excuse the loss, but they are a good team that had not clicked yet to this point in the season. That was one of my worries was they were 5-2 and not really played well. I watched a lot of their games, unlike most people commenting on them, and they had not clicked yet by any means. They had not looked as good as they had last year. Well, they looked better than they did at any point last year on Saturday afternoon at Rupp Arena, and but then you say that, and then the Twitter response or the message board response is, well, Brandon, like, no, UNC Wilmington actually isn't any good. They lost to Appalachian State by 30 points. Okay, yeah, that happened. Appalachian State actually is really good also. If it wasn't for James Madison being a top 25 team, you'd be talking about Appalachian State competing to win the Sun Belt. They're still going to compete to win the Sun Belt against a top 25 James Madison team. Like, you should circle those two home games on your schedule. They're going to be fun to watch. That's going to be high level basketball. App State's up to like 80th in KenPom now. Like, they are good. So yeah, are they 30 points better than UNC Wilmington? No. But is UNC Wilmington 7 points better than Kentucky? Either? No. So like, why do we concern ourselves so much with one specific outcome? And then guess what happens? Auburn loses to Appalachian State. So because I can't help myself, I go to Twitter. Hey, guess what, everybody? As I mentioned, Appalachian State's pretty good. They just beat Auburn. Then the response is, well, nobody said Auburn's any good either. What are we, Auburn? No, that's not what any of us are saying. It's not what any of us are saying. And Eddie, I appreciate your comments here. I'm going to dive into those here shortly when I get a chance to read those once I digress from my soapbox here. But the this rush to make things like again, I don't think every fan needs to take to Twitter and say, you know what, like it's okay, everybody calm down. It's one loss. It's like UNC Wilmington's great. Let's all not worry about it. No, you can worry about it. You can criticize the loss, but why, as a fan, are you going out of your way to make it worse than it is? Like, why is it not okay to acknowledge that they're not terrible? Why, why is it not okay to ever say anything nice about an opponent? Like, and for whatever reason, and I've mentioned this on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show podcast a couple of times. Somehow, I've become the one that's carrying water for the Tennessee Volunteers this year. I don't know how that happened. As somebody that writes for Kentucky Sports Radio, but like I've continued to say, hey, go look at their losses. They lost to North Carolina, they've lost to Kansas, and lost to Gonzaga. Like, if you thought that Tennessee was a top 10 or 15 team in the country before the season, why would you not still think that? Look at the teams they've lost to. But as soon as you say something nice about Tennessee, all you hear is, well, Coach Barnes can never win something in the tournament. They're not going to make a Final Four. I told you Tennessee wasn't any good. Like, why do you think? And like, what? Why does it impact you as a Kentucky fan to mention that another team might be decent at basketball? And I had a really long post that I'm going to share it on the board at some point, so it's not behind a paywall. But I wrote about how coaching college basketball ruined my fandom as a Kentucky fan, and that's admittedly kind of a clickbait, catchy headline. I'm as much of a Kentucky fan as you can be at this point. But what I meant by that was like some of the craziness has worn off. Like I mentioned in that article how when I was in high school, I believe I would have been a junior in high school when we went to the NIT with Billy Gillespie and lost to Gardner Webb. Um, I started a Facebook page at the time petitioning for us to not accept the NIT invitation because we don't play in the NIT. We're Kentucky. Like, I think that's the stupidest line of thing. Like the whole like this is Kentucky, and that translates to this is Duke, this is North Carolina. I think that's the dumbest argument in the world. Like, that means nothing. What you've done in the past means nothing for this given year. The players are different, the coaches are different, all this kind of stuff. So like the fact that we went to 3 straight championships in 96, 97, 98 and won 2 of them, that has zero impact on whether or not we can beat UNC Wilmington. And there's a lot of talk of like, well, teams that make the Final Four don't have losses outside the KenPom top 100 or whatever, metrics you want to make up again to make the loss seem like a bigger deal than it is. And again, I don't understand that line of thinking as a fan. I would, again, I'm not blue shaded glasses. I'm just like, why would you not err on the side of trying to make it seem not as bad as opposed to worse? If you can choose one way or the other, why would you not choose to make it look a little better than a little worse? But that's not where we are as a society, I don't think. Anyway, before they get too stale, I want to read Eddie's comments here in the chat. I'm undefeated all time. What are these losses you're referencing? Then he says losing to UNCG didn't put me in panic mode, even though I was envisioning this could be an all-time team. But it probably does knock UK out of contention for a 1 seed. Yes, it does. Well, actually, I want to walk that back a little bit. In reality, does it? Yes, it probably does, because we're probably going to lose other games along the way. Like, we're probably going to lose, at Mississippi State, for example, at some point, or we're going to lose at South Carolina, or we're going to drop a couple games, we're going to lose at home to Arkansas or something like that. Like, we're going to, split the Kansas and Gonzaga, or the North Carolina and Gonzaga games. However, the reason that I don't get overly worked up about that is, again, we're talking about a loss that happened on December 2nd. There are so many data points to come before we worry about Selection Sunday. Now, does every game matter? Absolutely. And let's see, Kentucky's played 8 games. We're going to play. We're guaranteed 31 regular season games. We have 23 data points left, and that's not even counting the SEC tournament. So we have 23 opportunities to either have a great resume or a bad resume. So, thought experiment. Again, kind of thinking about the the angel and the devil on the shoulders of a fan here. Of let's say Kentucky beats North Carolina, beats Gonzaga, and then let's say we go 14-4 in the SEC. Let's go 14-4 in the SEC. That means we finish um, out of 31. We're gonna have 6 losses, so that means we're gonna be 25-6 in the regular season. So let's fast forward a little more. You make it to the finals. You go 27-7 this season with essentially one bad loss to UNC Wilmington and then 4 conference losses. You win the SEC. Like, are you a 1 seed? Probably not, but you're sure as heck a 2 seed at that point. And let's going further. Let's say we go 15-3 in the conference. Well, at that point, you probably are a 1 seed. So again, am I expecting us to go 15-3? No, probably not. Even if we're great, we might not go 15-3 in the SEC. But my point is that to me, there's no difference in the 2 lines of thinking of, well, now we can't be a 1 seed. Like, that's making several assumptions, in my opinion. Just as if I want to sit here and say, like, oh, well, there's still a path to a 1 seed, that's making assumptions just on the other end. And I don't understand the rush. Now, this isn't on you, Eddie. This is, I've heard this from 50 people over the last few days of, like, look at the Final Four last season. Is it easier to make it as a 1 or a 2 seed? Absolutely. Like, why would you not rather be a top seed? But we had a 4 seed, 2 5 seeds, and a 9 seed last year. Like, I think seeding matters less and less now. Is it still easier? Obviously. But do I think that we can't make the Final Four if we're a 4 seed? No, I really don't think it's going to matter that much. And then also, like I said, to me, there's enough data points left that if things go how we all thought they could go before UNC Wilmington, then we can still be a 1 seed. Like, if we go 15-3 and win the SEC, probably going to be a 1 seed. So just as you can make the negative assumptions, you can make some positive assumptions. And I just don't understand the fandom dichotomy that pushes us all to the negative side. But I think that's pretty much the crux of the conversation I want to have today. Again, this veered off to becoming a Kentucky conversation, and guess what? The show has my name in the title, so I get to do that from time to time. But I think this pertains. It definitely pertains to Purdue because, again, I'm closer to that situation, and I hear a bunch of what the Boilermakers are mad about as well. But like it, I just don't understand the rush of fandom to say the sky is falling. Like, I think that's, and in some respects, I think that's changed maybe over the last decade or so. Like, I remember when I was younger in, high school or college 10, 15 years ago, when it seemed like fandom was like making excuses for your team and like, well, yeah, this happened, but it's because of this. And now it's like, it's the opposite of like, we're pulling out data points and excuses to somehow push our own teams down. And I don't get that. That'll never be me. If you're a follower of mine, you probably know that by now. But anyway, that's today's episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. I greatly appreciate those of you who have chimed in here live. Eddie, I appreciate you being in the comment section, and anybody else who wants to fire off as well going forward. If you're watching this not live, feel free to drop a comment here in the show thread, or certainly hit me up on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. I'm happy to keep the conversation going there anytime. You can make sure you're subscribed to the podcast as well. The Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show every Monday and Friday. We have episodes. The Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show here on YouTube is where the All Fired Up episodes live every Wednesday at 12:30. And as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR as well. Thanks to you all for tuning in and watching. Let's see, what all do you do on YouTube? You like, you comment, you subscribe, do all those good things. Thank you all so much once again for being here with All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. Until next time, let's enjoy some college hoops.